Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. I've been doing a countdown to my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 148 is Rogue Legacy. Alright, so before we jump into the video, I just want to mention that the other day I did announce my Patreon. I'm not going to get into all of it here, but you can find a link in the description below to that video, so if you're interested in giving me money in exchange for benefits, then you can go check that out. Alright, on to the game. Rogue Legacy is a roguelike with, and this is going to blow your mind, a legacy component. Shocking, I know. Venture into a gigantic magical castle in an effort to defeat the evils within. Along the way, you'll discover many treasures, mostly in the form of money, but sometimes other things too. The combat is an action platforming system, swinging your sword around and slinging spells. Well, spell. Each run of the game, you get access to one spell amongst several possibilities, and each one behaves pretty differently. The sword play is extremely simple regarding combat, but one wrinkle really elevates it with how it interacts with the platforming. While midair, if you do a downward attack, you strike directly below you, and there's floating platforms throughout many of the rooms that will expand when you hit them, allowing for some pretty exciting vertical movement options. Kill as much stuff as you can, and collect as much treasure as you can. You're starting just in the castle part, and there's some decent enemy variety with big melee dudes, little spellcaster dudes, and creepy painting dudes amongst some others. Dodge traps and do whatever you can to stay alive. There's more to the game than just this castle, however. There's a few other environments that the castle leads to, each with their own enemies and increasingly difficult challenges, though a lot of the enemies are admittedly just reskins of the stuff in the castle, but you do find some unique things as well. Occasionally, you can even find little mini-bosses that are random. Eventually, you'll probably die, but that's okay. In fact, it's even a good thing. The big appeal of the game is absolutely the progression system. When you die, you keep all of your treasure you found and can spend money on upgrades for future characters. A lot of them come from a large talent system, and there's some crazy stuff you can get there. You do have your standard fare of just flat stat increases, but you also get things like a small chance to instantly revive when you die, or increased invulnerability windows when you take damage. The most important part of each new run, however, is picking your next of kin. You play as members of the same family the entirety of the game. I'm probably hundreds of generations in at this point, and somehow the technology available to us hasn't really changed. I'm still using like swords and everything, but we're here to suspend disbelief, so that's okay. Each character has some of their own traits that makes them unique. The most surface level difference is their class. There are 10 classes in Rogue Legacy. Okay, there's actually 17, but most of them are just upgraded forms of the other ones you eventually unlock. In addition to different base stats for each class, they have a special trait or ability. Knights and Paladins are fairly standard melee folk and can use a shield to block attacks. Mage and Archmage are the strongest pure spellcasters and restore mana whenever you kill something. Archmages, unlike everyone else, has access to multiple spells you can cycle through at will. Barbarians and Barbarian Kings/Queens have by far the best defensive stats and can shout so loud they destroy objects and projectiles in front of you. Knaves and Assassins have relatively low stats, but a much higher chance of critical hits. Assassins can also turn invisible or invulnerable for brief periods of time. Shinobi and Hokage are very fast and hit outrageously hard, but have a 0% chance to crit with their attacks. Depending on how you're spending those talent points and upgrades that I mentioned, that could mean you're doing way better than everyone else, could mean worse, could be, kinda just depends. Hokage can also do a short teleport. Miners and Spelunkers are one of the most interesting classes because they are not geared towards combat at all. Their stats are terrible. I mean, just awful. Like, don't bother fighting for the most part. But you gain a huge bonus to the amount of gold you collect. A lot of the gold you're going to find is just from destroying terrain and opening chests you find and stuff. So if you can just like blitz through the level without fighting stuff, if you can avoid it, because you're really bad. Just breaking lots of objects, chandeliers, lights, lamps, everything. Just anything and everything. Plants, everything. Drops money, which it's really weird, some of the things that drop money. Spelunkers also have a lamp that can reveal the hidden items on the map, even if they haven't been there yet. Spell Thieves and Spell Swords gain mana on every hit they do, but their spellcasting stats aren't as good as mages and archmages, but they can attack better, so it's an interesting balance. They can also cast upgraded versions of spells once you upgrade to the Spell Sword, but it's a lot more mana. Dragon is really cool. You are still a man. You are a dragon man. But you are not Trogdor! I apologize to everyone for everything that just happened. It will never happen again. Except for maybe if I cover Guitar Hero, because I think one has that. When playing as Dragon, instead of jumping, you toggle flight because you're a dragon. And instead of spells, you shoot fireballs because you're a dragon. And dragons are cool. My favorite class, though, is Lich and Lich King/Queen. You gain an increase in your maximum health every time you kill something, anything, but start with very low mana. The mana issue isn't actually an issue when you upgrade to the King or Queen, because that gives you an ability to spend maximum health to increase your maximum mana. There's an overall limit to how much you can increase both, but as you go exploring and kill just a whole bunch of stuff, eventually you're just a really healthy, really casty, lichy boy going around murderizing and stuff. It's awesome. Lastly, there is Trader, which I didn't even know existed until I looked up the class list to script this video, because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget something. The reason I didn't know it existed is because you have to beat the game to unlock it. I still haven't beaten this game because I really suck at bullet hell, which definitely matters, but I'll cover that in a bit. From what I'm seeing here, its stats are alright, but not amazing, but it does cast some really strong magic. Whew! Now that you know what the classes are like, there's a couple of other things to look at when picking your character. Of course, there's whichever spell they have available, but sometimes there's other traits too. A lot of them are good things for you, but some are bad, and some are just downright funny. Some good ones might be that they're like light-footed, so they can walk on spike floors without taking damage. A bad one might be that you're nearsighted, making everything not close to your character really blurry. A funny one is that you're dyslexic. This doesn't have an impact on the gameplay itself, but anytime there's text, it's just a jumble of letters, and that's hilarious. After you pick your character, you can talk to the blacksmith and change your weapons, or the enchanter to change your rune loadout. The way you unlock either of these things is by finding them in the dungeon. There are secret chests you have to find hidden pathways to, or sometimes fairy chests you can only open once you beat a challenge. Getting the runes goes hand in hand sometimes with these chests, because they might be something like crossing a giant chasm of spikes, or going from one platform to another without taking damage. The aforementioned light-footed trait might deal with the spikes, but what if you can't reach the platform the chest is on? Well, there's mobility runes that can let you jump higher or dash mid-air. The Dragon class also solves a lot of this once you unlock it, but how do you know you're going to need that if the dungeon is random each time? Well, before you go in, you can pay gold to someone to lock in the dungeon to be a continuation of your last run. Things that were cleared are still cleared, and importantly, challenges failed are still failed. But if you know there's something for you there, and you have the proper tools to get it this time, you can go for it. Even if you have all of the possible upgrades and gear within that zone of the dungeon, it's still very much worth it as you unlock permanent stat bonuses when you find something otherwise completed. With all of the ways to upgrade your character, can the different monsters throughout the dungeon really be that difficult? Well, most of them actually aren't, as long as you get good enough at the platforming and dodging. But the bosses? The bosses are hard, especially for me. Remember when I said I was bad at bullet hell? Yeah, check this out. Beating this game is gonna take me a long ass time. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 147th favorite game, where I go back to school again, but this time, like, in the past.